Hudson and Chinny find Captain Sunburst. Hudson sat in his favorite chair, which tilted a little to the side. Chinny stood up eagerly on his hind legs, begging to come out of his cage.
Are you ready, Chinny?
Hudson asked his pet chinchilla. Chinny ran around in a circle and stood back up on his hind legs.
Do you want to come out of your cage for the story?
Chinny ran in a circle again. Then he climbed to the highest level of his cage and back down. Hudson had never seen him so excited.
I know, Chinny. This is the moment we've been waiting for.
Hudson and Chinny had been reading the adventures of Captain Sunburst since they first met in the pet store. Hudson remembered that day very clearly. He had gone to the pet store to get a hamster. He chose the cutest one and took it to the counter. Everyone who has an unusual pet should read this story, the pet store clerk told Hudson. He held up a book.
What's an unusual pet?
Hudson asked the clerk. What's an unusual pet? The clerk shouted, shaking his head of white hair. He shook his finger at Hudson. You're buying a chinchilla, and you don't know what an unusual pet is? Hudson just stared at him. It means not common or different. You need this story more than I thought. The clerk handed Hudson the chinchilla in his cage, along with a book called The Adventures of Captain Sunburst. Then he disappeared into the back room of the store. Hudson set the cage down on the counter and looked at the creature inside.
I thought you were a hamster,
he said. The chinchilla covered his head with his paws, clearly annoyed at Hudson's ignorance.
Sorry, little guy. I didn't know.
He looked again at the chinchilla and then at the book. On the cover was a bright yellow lizard standing up tall on a rock. The scales under his chin appeared to be little orange spikes, like an orange beard. He looked strong and a little scary. Hudson wondered if the lizard was Captain Sunburst. He read the back of the book.
Unusual pets everywhere look for Captain Sunburst, the bearded dragon, to help them when they're in trouble. In his first adventure, Captain Sunburst makes a chilling discovery. A new chinchilla owner thinks his chinchilla is a hamster. How will the chinchilla ever get a dust bath? Join Captain Sunburst in this exciting adventure.
The chinchilla's eyes grew wider. He ran around in a circle and stood on his hind legs. Hudson looked at the chinchilla and then back at the book.
That's strange. Well, I don't think you're a hamster anymore. And I guess you need to take dust baths. This book sounds interesting, don't you think?
Hudson hesitated as he thought of a name for his new pet.
Chinny,
he said with a decisive nod.
You're Chinny the chinchilla, and you're not a hamster.
Chinny nodded back in approval.
Should we go home and read about Captain Sunburst's adventure with the chinchilla?
Hudson asked. Chinny ran around in circles and hopped up on his hind legs. Hudson picked up Chinny's cage and tucked the book under his arm. Then he yelled,
"Thank you, sir,"
toward the back room where the pet store clerk had disappeared. By the end of that day, Hudson and Chinny loved Captain Sunburst. His adventure about helping the pet chinchilla taught them so much. Hudson learned that Chinny needed dust baths 3 times a week. So every other day, Hudson brought Chinny out of his cage and placed him in a container with a thin layer of dust at the bottom. Chinny rolled and rolled. He sent dust clouds into the air. Hudson coughed and sneezed. Chinny squealed in delight. Captain Sunburst also taught Hudson about cages.
Chinchillas love to climb,
Hudson read. So Hudson and Chinny were shocked to read that Captain Sunburst found the pet chinchilla living in a very small cage. The chinchilla had nowhere to climb. Chinny barked and scratched at the door of his cage when they got to that page.
What's wrong, Chinny?
Hudson asked, blinking his eyes innocently. Chinny jumped. He hit his head on the top of his very small cage.
I'm so sorry, Chinny,
Hudson said. He put down the book and began constructing a bigger cage right away. When it was finished, Chinny's new cage had platforms at different levels. Ladders connected one platform to another. Chinny could climb whenever he wanted. Hudson even made a house for Chinny. It was perched on the highest platform. Chinny could go in his shelter whenever he wanted to be alone. Chinny snuggled up to Hudson to show his gratitude. Then they continued reading The Adventures of Captain Sunburst. Captain Sunburst gave a warning about chinchilla teeth. Hudson read.
The new chinchilla owner was not happy. Her chinchilla chewed the legs off a chair. Then he chewed a rug in half. He even tried to chew a lamp cord.
Hudson gulped. He looked up from his book. Chinny was chewing on one of the legs of Hudson's chair. The chair was tilting.
Chinny, no!
Hudson scooped him up gently and placed him back in his cage. Chinny looked down. Hudson kept reading.
Captain Sunburst explained to the new owner, chinchillas chew because their teeth keep growing for their entire lives. Wow, Chinny, you can grow really long teeth.
Hudson looked at Chinny, who was now chewing on the bars of his cage. He continued reading.
Chinchillas need chew toys to keep their teeth at the right length. Without chew toys, chinchillas will chew everything in sight.
Hudson went out and got Chinny lots of chew toys. Chinny stopped chewing the furniture. Before Captain Sunburst's first adventure had ended, Hudson and Chinny were best friends. Captain Sunburst saved the chinchilla in the story. He helped the new owner understand her new pet. Everyone was happy. That might have been the end of Captain Sunburst for Hudson and Chinny. But then Hudson read the last page.
Captain Sunburst had helped a friend in need,
read Hudson. Chinny squeaked. Hudson continued reading.
The chinchilla was happy in his new home thanks to Captain Sunburst. But it wasn't long before Captain Sunburst came back to visit. Something was wrong. Captain Sunburst needed the chinchilla's help.
Chinny barked. Hudson looked up from the page.
I know. I'm worried too, Chinny.
Hudson went on.
Captain Sunburst said, Chinchilla, will you come with me to rescue another unusual pet? This time, a sugar glider is in need of care. I could use the help of a super chin like you.
Chinny jumped up and down in excitement without hitting his head.
That's right, Chinny. It's a new character. His name is Super Chin. He's going to help Captain Sunburst. The adventures will continue.
And so Hudson and Chinny set out to find the next Captain Sunburst book. Hudson put Chinny in his carrier, and off they went to the library.
May I help you?
The librarian asked. Then she added,
Oh, what a cute hamster.
Chinny squeaked and put his paws over his head.
He's not a hamster. He's a chinchilla.
Hudson informed the librarian.
A chinwhata?
She squinted at him.
A chinchilla. I'm looking for a book. Can you help me? You betcha. That's what I do. I find books. Short books, long books, heavy books, light books, funny books, sad books. I can find any kind of book.
The librarian boasted.
Oh, good.
Hudson said with a sigh of relief. Chinny let out a breath too.
What is the book called?
The librarian asked.
It's called The Adventures of Captain Sunburst.
Hudson answered. Chinny squeaked.
Oh, that's right. The Adventures of Captain Sunburst and Super Chin.
Hudson corrected himself. Chinny ran in a circle. The librarian squinted at Hudson.
The Adventures of Captain who? Captain Sunburst.
Hudson said. Chinny squeaked.
And Super Chin. I've never heard of that book.
She said very slowly, her eyes growing bigger with each word.
It's a series. This is the first one.
Hudson held up his book. She grabbed it and said,
I'll be right back.
She quickly disappeared into the back room. The librarian returned a few minutes later. She found Hudson walking around in circles. Chinny was chewing on the carrier door. They weren't happy that she had taken their book.
I'm sorry, but we don't have this book.
She said, back to her confident self.
You don't have it?
Hudson asked. He wrinkled his forehead.
That's right.
She smiled and handed him the book.
I don't understand. I thought the library had every book. I'm sorry, there's no trace of Captain Sunburst in the library.
Chinny squeaked. The librarian just smiled and then said,
Now who's next?
Hudson picked up Chinny's carrier and tucked the book under his arm and shuffled toward the door.
What are we going to do now, Chinny?
Hudson said when they were outside. Chinny barked.
What is it, boy?
Chinny barked again. Hudson took him out of his carrier. Chinny jumped out of Hudson's arms and ran to the corner. He sat and waited for Hudson to catch up. When Hudson got there, he scooped Chinny up gently.
Chinny, you can't run away like that.
He said, a little out of breath.
You could get...
And then he gasped. Across the street, there was a huge sign. It said, Ramsey's Rare Books.
Chinny, you're a genius.
Hudson hugged him before putting him back into his carrier. They crossed the street and went inside the bookstore. It was dark and the air was damp. The shop was narrow and there were rows and rows of bookshelves on different levels. Hudson stood at the counter, but no one was there.
Now what do we do, boy?
Hudson asked. Chinny barked.
Do you promise not to run again?
Chinny squeaked.
All right.
Hudson said, taking Chinny out of his carrier and setting him down on the counter. Chinny took a few steps. He stood in front of a bell. He looked up at Hudson.
Should I ring it?
Hudson asked. Chinny squeaked again. Hudson rang the bell and then said,
Thanks, boy, but you better go back in your carrier.
A moment later, a curtain opened and a man stepped up to the counter. He wore glasses way down on the tip of his nose. He peered over them at Hudson and Chinny. Yes? He asked.
I'm looking for a book.
Hudson explained. Yes? The man said again.
It's called The Adventures of Captain Sunburst.
Hudson hesitated just a moment before quickly adding,
And Super Chin.
Chinny squealed. The man didn't say anything. He just looked down his glasses at Hudson and Chinny. Hudson shifted his weight from one foot to the next and then back again.
This is the first book in the series.
Hudson said. He held up the book so the man could see it. May I see it? The man asked. Hudson glanced at Chinny. He was already chewing on the carrier door.
Are you Mr. Ramsey?
Hudson asked. He didn't want to give the book to anyone else. Yes, Mr. Ramsey said and held out his hand. Hudson gave him the book. Mr. Ramsey disappeared behind the curtain. Hudson started walking in circles. Chinny continued chewing on the carrier door. Mr. Ramsey was taking longer than the librarian. At last, the curtain parted and Mr. Ramsey appeared. This is a rare book, Mr. Ramsey said, peering again down his glasses at Hudson and Chinny.
But it exists?
Hudson asked. Yes, this one copy. Chinny barked. Mr. Ramsey gripped the book tighter.
Do you have the next book in the series?
Hudson asked. He reached out his hand, hoping Mr. Ramsey would give back the book. Chinny barked again. I do not, Mr. Ramsey said. Would you like to sell me this book? He asked, still holding it tightly. Chinny barked loudly, and Mr. Ramsey jumped back.
No, thank you. May I have my book back, please?
Hudson asked. Mr. Ramsey hesitated before very slowly handing the book back to Hudson.
Thank you.
Hudson said, snatching the book back quickly before Mr. Ramsey, seller of rare books, changed his mind. Hudson tucked the book under his arm, picked up Chinny's carrier, and ran for the door. He continued running for a few minutes. Finally, he stopped and set Chinny's carrier down. Hudson bent over, his hands on his knees, and was breathing hard.
Oh, Chinny.
He said between breaths.
I wasn't sure that Mr. Ramsey
More breaths.
would give Captain Sunburst back.
Chinny squeaked.
It seems like finding the next book is harder than we thought.
Hudson said. Chinny barked.
What now, boy? Do you have another idea? You can't run away this time. It's too dangerous.
Chinny stood on his hind legs in the carrier. He put one of his front paws over his heart.
Okay, you promised.
Hudson said. He let Chinny out again, placing him gently on the ground next to him. Chinny took a few steps, and Hudson walked beside him. They walked for a little while. Then Chinny stopped. He stood on his hind legs and put his front legs on a storefront window.
What's this place?
Hudson said. After a moment, he recognized it.
It's the pet store where I found you. What a great idea, Chinny. Maybe the clerk can help us.
Hudson picked Chinny up and went inside. The clerk was behind the counter. He saw Hudson and Chinny coming and yelled, "No returns. Those are my rules. Look." He pointed to a sign on the counter.
What? Oh no, I don't want to return Chinny.
Hudson giggled and Chinny squealed. The idea seemed silly to them. "Then what do you want? Another chinchilla?" the clerk asked.
No, not that either. There's only one Chinny.
Hudson said. Chinny's cheeks turned pink. "Well?" the clerk said, a little impatiently. Hudson held up the Captain Sunburst book.
Do you have the next book?
He asked hopefully. "What's the next one about?" the clerk asked. Chinny barked.
Well, Captain Sunburst and Super Chin.
"Wait, who's Super Chin? I don't remember any Super Chin," the clerk interrupted.
At the end of this book, Captain Sunburst asks the chinchilla to help him rescue a sugar glider. Their adventure is in the next book.
"Is that right?" the clerk said, rubbing his chin.
Well, do you have it?
Hudson asked. Chinny was running in circles again. "The next book? No, of course not. I don't sell sugar gliders." Hudson's face fell. Chinny stopped running in circles. "But the pet store over on 42nd Street does," the clerk told them. "I'm sure they'll have the Captain Sunburst story about sugar gliders. Every unusual pet needs Captain Sunburst." Hudson and Chinny thanked the clerk. They ran for the bus to 42nd Street. There were a lot of sugar gliders in the pet store. Chinny barked and squeaked, but Hudson told him one chinchilla was enough for him. They found the next book, though. Hudson read the title.
Captain Sunburst and Super Chin Save Sugar.
Chinny barked.
No, let's wait until we get home. I love my tilted chair. Let's read it there.
Chinny squeaked.
Oh, look.
Hudson said. He was reading the back cover of the book.
There's a third adventure about saving a fennec fox. We'll have to find the pet store where they sell foxes after we're done with this one.
Finally, they were home. Hudson sat in his favorite chair, which tilted a little to the side. He let Chinny out of his cage. He began to read.
Captain Sunburst and his faithful friend Super Chin were...
This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Discuss.
What?